So back in the old days when I first started my career, I had hair, and I came from the north of England where we had to work down the pit before we went to work. No, we didn't really have to do that. But back in those days, we didn't really have a lot of digital work. We had television, so we might provide logos for brands we were working on for TV commercials and things like that. But we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all of the digital options that we have now. So generally we would work with Pantone colors and CMYK, depending on what print format we were going to. If we were making packaging, for instance, we would probably use spot colors. And a lot of packaging brands still do. On big print runs, it's more cost effective and more accurate to have Pantone colors in your design than printing with CMYK. But for ads and anything like that, where we were printing in color, then the magazine would be in CMYK, so the logo needed to be provided in that. But today we have all of these digital options. So today what I want to look at is how to prepare your finished logo that's been approved by your client, ready for print and also ready for the digital world. So let's call this my master version. And what I'm going to do with this is use it as the start point for my other version. So I'm going to create a CMYK version, an RGB, and then a web safe version as well. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do myself a quick save as, and I'm going to change this to be Revolution, and I'll call it master and call it PMS. And I'm just going to save that to the resources file for this particular video, and I'm just going to hit save and go through everything there. Now the color mode for this document is CMYK, and that's fine because this is a CMYK document. It's Pantone colors, so it is basically designed for print. So what I'm going to do is I can keep that color mode. I'm now going to do a save as, and I'm going to call this Revolution and call it CMYK. If I've got other options, I'm going to have a reversed out version. I would probably call it POS because then it's positive, so I know that this is the positive version. And if I had landscape and portrait options, again, I would need to add those in there. But we're just doing this as a quick exercise, so we'll just save it as positive so we have a version that is the positive CMYK version. Now I don't need to do anything with the black, but I do need to work with the orange because currently that is a spot color and I'm producing the CMYK version. So if I just double click the color, then it gives me the ability in here to change it to a process color. Now it's at this point that I check whether the colors are correct as per the Pantone swatches. So I mentioned before, I always use the Pantone color swatches, and this is my start point for any of my colors. The reason I do that is that I can look at this and I can choose a color. If I select a color off the screen, I'm reliant upon my color breakdown on my screen and my calibration on my screen to know what that color is. And sometimes then when I print it, it's not going to come out the way that I had envisaged it. So this gives me a definitive color that I can start from. It gives me expectations for CMYK as well. I can go to a printer's when we're printing the design and they'll have their version of the book and we'll look at it and we'll go, yeah, this needs to match this. So from a printing point of view, this is the start point. And then with the RGB, we can go off the color references because again, that's going to be dependent on the screen, what you see. But at least then we're starting with the right numbers for when we produce something in RGB or for digital format. So I'm going to check these numbers up against the Pantone color. My Pantone colors tell me that this should be 73 and 87. And if we look here on screen, it is. This is a design that I created post Pantone and Adobe not working together. So I can actually type these numbers in and mix this color and name it Pantone 172. So if I sent it to a printer or to a sign maker, anybody who needs a spot version, they can see that that's what color it is. and this is the right breakdown for when they use it in CMYK. But actually, they kind of don't need this. This could be anything. These numbers here could be anything for the spot version. I've actually sent out artwork where white was magenta, so the printer could see it on the artwork, but we called it print white, and it was a magenta color. But the name in the swatches was called print white, and the printer had requested that so they could see it in the artwork, and they knew what to print white. Now the artwork looked really unusual. We did that right at the end, but that is sometimes a step to do. So these colors do match the actual Pantone color. So once I change this to process, it will change over here in the swatches. So if I click this now, you can see that if I just go Command Z, that the little spot disappears. So the name is still the same. So if I wanted to rename it, for instance, then I can call it Pantone 172 and I can call it CMYK so that I know that it's now the CMYK version. And the black doesn't change at all. So now I would need to save this document, and now I've got a CMYK version of the logo. If I click on the orange again, you can see that it's 172 CMYK, and if I click on the CMYK icon, you can see that my numbers are still correct. So just go back in and select that orange to make sure that it's still that, and just click save again. So now if I'm going to make an RGB version of this, I can come down, I can do a save as, I'll call it logo positive and then RGB. And again, I'm going to hit save. Now the first thing I need to do for this one is to convert the document color mode from CMYK to RGB, because we've been dealing with CMYK documents before, so everything has been set up for CMYK. And if I just undo that, if you look over here to the right and look at all of the little icons here are all CMYK. And if I just go Command Shift undo, I'll redo my undo, then you can see that everything has changed to RGB. So now I'm dealing with an RGB document, and up here my preview is RGB. So when I'm dealing with the colors now, I should look at them as RGB colors. And when I click on the orange, I can then convert it to RGB. So I can consider mixing it, or I can double click it up here. I can rename it to RGB, and then I can look at the recommendations from Pantone as to what those colors should be for RGB. So Pantone recommend 250 by 70 by 22. That's their recommendation for this color breakdown. So if I save that, now I've got an RGB version. And if I click on the black, and again I come down here and I select the RGB equivalent, you can see that it's given me these numbers in here. But I know a full black, I should go all the way down to 000 to give me a full black in RGB. So that would now be my RGB version. And I probably just need to do a save as, because I've just noticed I still have RGB. The thing I changed was it should still be positive. So I'll delete that other version once we're done. So save now, Revolution RGB positive. And this now is my RGB version that I can send out to people. It is a RGB file. The colors are mixed as RGB and the color format is RGB. And if I export PNGs and JPEGs from this, then I know all of my colors are correct as I go out. So now the next thing to look at is, do I need web safe versions of the colors? And you can select those in Illustrator. You might think that it's maybe going a little bit too far in selecting those, but it depends on your client and where they are going to be seen. If their logo is seen a lot, then online, then you're going to need to make sure that the design is appropriate for an online version and is going to work 100% of the time online. So let's look now at creating the version that we'll call the web version. So I'm going to start off with a save as. And again, just come in here. I'm going to get rid of RGB and I'm going to call it web. And I'm going to come back down, do all those usual saves. And I'm going to click on the orange and I'm going to open up the swatches. And I'm going to go to select it as the RGB equivalent. So I've got rid of it from the selected color that we have up here in the swatches. And it's now this mix down here. And if I click on here and go to a web safe RGB, you'll see there'll be a couple of things will change. One of them in here is the options for the colors that we have, and also the way that the color is specified as well. So you can see here it's now FA4616, and when we've got our color options, you can see we've got a lot less options. We had loads and loads of colors before. We're now in WebSave, we have less options. So it is changing that color for us. And we can then do the same with the black. And again, go to the WebSave and black is black in WebSave, so that's going to be exactly the same. So you can see there's no change in that one. So if I wanted to make this orange, the same orange up here, and again, we can do the same thing. We can call it 172. We can call it web, and then in here where it's got RGB we can go to web safe and it will change those, change its number. And now when we click on this one, we've got that, and we can then know that it's now the web safe one. So there's two ways you can go about it. This one's probably a little bit more robust because my swatch is staying the right color. And then when I export this one, again, this is my master, and then I can export from here as PNG or JPEG, whichever I need. And potentially I can send this to a web developer as the master version, and then they can export it themselves to put into their software. So that's how I go about preparing logos ready for the outside world. I always have the 3 versions and I keep my master. And that's got me by for the last few years, and nobody's asked for anything different. So hopefully it will be enough for you when you produce your designs, and you can apply that into your practice the next time you have a logo ready to go to the outside world.